So we're going to consider, as I said today, the words, Jesus commands not to judge. And so we have these words from Luke's Gospel, do not judge, and you will not be judged. And he continues by saying, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Read on its own, like this, it seems fairly straightforward. However, when we consider it in the light of the rest of the Gospel, it is not quite so easy as it might at first appear. So, for example, we find these words in Matthew chapter 7. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. And you can recognize in this passage there is a command here actually to make a judgment of a kind. So we need to come to understand what is the relationship between these passages and how do we practice them. Here's another one from John chapter 7. Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly. You can see that the picture is far from simple. However, I think there is a way through this, and I'd like to show you that this morning. So we're going to consider this word judgment, or to judge, and what it is. But in order to do that properly, we have to consider two other words alongside it, and they are to save and to condemn. Now I'm going to take these backwards. To condemn, and I'm looking at the meaning of the Greek words here. To condemn means to pass sentence or to condemn. Now you can imagine this in a legal sense. A condemned man is one who faces the death penalty. And that we must bear in mind when we consider the word condemn and when we consider judgment. Contrast with that the meaning of to save or salvation, which means to deliver out of danger and into safety, to rescue from destruction. I find salvation and to save one of those words that we trot off our lips very quickly. We hear it said many times by many Christians, and we forget its significance. To rescue from destruction. We tend to forget the mortal danger that we find ourselves in this natural world. And the proper understanding of these two words helps us to remember that important definition. So to condemn is to pass sentence. To save is to deliver out of danger and into safety, to rescue from destruction. And to judge is to separate or distinguish or make a choice. And so judgment leads either to salvation or to condemnation. This was included in one of the lexicons that I consulted, and it talks about judgment. Making a determination of right or wrong, that is, innocence or guilt, especially on an official or legal standard. We only judge accurately by intelligent comparison and contrast based on God's word, i.e., to approve or prefer what is correct and reject what is inferior or wrong. And that's all wrapped up in that definition of the word judgment. When you think about that Luke chapter 6 passage, the very simple, straightforward, stark, do not judge lest ye be judged, there's a link there to what I've referred to before as the lex talionis, the law of retaliation, that if you judge, you can expect the same judgment in return. So all of this is wrapped up in this idea of judgment, and we have to remember it together. Let's chase this a little further. Let's think about this. By whom or by what are we condemned? What does the Bible say? Well, Matthew chapter 12, we read this: "For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned." Mark chapter 16, "He who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned." And from John chapter 8, we read this a few weeks ago, and it's just before the reading that Linda brought to us this morning. Jesus says, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said to her, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." What I want you to notice about all of those passages, what is it that condemns us? It is not the Lord. It is our words, it is our beliefs and everything that believing entails, but it is not the Lord. The Lord, time and again, refuses to condemn. And that's a very significant point for us to remember. Now, by whom or by what are we saved? John chapter 3, verse 16 and then verse 17. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." Do you see that same idea there? God does not condemn. God seeks always to save. And then what about the judgment? How does judgment take place? By whom or by what are we judged? These are the Lord's words. "You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. And yet if I do judge, my judgment is true. For I am not alone, but I am with the Father who sent me." Again, do you see here, the Lord does not judge. We are judged by our own words and our own actions, and not at all by the Lord. Having said that, the means of judgment is very important for us to bear in mind. This is John chapter 3 again. And this is the condemnation. Now, I just want to mention about this word, and I've highlighted it particularly. I am using the New King James version of the word. And in the New King James translation, it says condemnation. However, the word used here is not condemnation, it is judgment. And it's very important. I think it's an important thing for us to remember when we read this passage. We are not talking about condemnation here. We are talking about judgment, and it's a very significant difference. And this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light, and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, that they have been done in God. And that idea of the Lord being the light of the world, as you've heard, is so very important. If you think about what happens in a court of law, a great deal of time is spent bringing actions to light. It is about determining what actually took place, what actually happened in a given circumstance. And only once that has been done can a judgment correctly be made. And it is made not in the light of the judge's opinion, not in the light of the opinion of the jurors, but in the light of the law. The law is the thing that determines what is right and what is wrong. And when a situation is brought before the law and understood, so we understand exactly what took place, then judgment can be made. One of the problems we face in the modern world is much of our opinion and much of our judgment is based on trial by media. And unfortunately, trial by media holds no such standard. Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. It is coming to the light. That is what judgment is. I want to share with you, just to finish off, a couple of passages from the teachings of the church, and you'll see in these passages a reflection of these same principles. It is the truth present with a person that engages in thinking. And when thought takes place in a person, he employs truth to think with. It's an interesting way of phrasing it, isn't it? All true judgment comes from a standard which is above my own thoughts and feelings. We've talked about the way that in civil terms, it is the law that defines what is right and wrong. In spiritual terms, it is the Word. It is not my own opinion of it, it is the Word, plain and simple. And so to judge correctly, we must use the truth of the Word to do so. And in doing that, we measure not only another person and our perception of another person, but we measure ourselves against that standard also. And what I find really interesting is we are judged by our very judgments. When we proclaim or make a statement about somebody, we put it out in the open and it reflects us. It reflects our own character. It reflects the nature of me. And I am judged by that statement as much as the person I am judging by it. One is never allowed to judge the nature of another person's spiritual life. For the Lord alone knows this. But one is allowed to judge the nature of another person's life, both private and public, since this is of importance to society. So there you have the second half of that passage talking about the legal process, the judgment that takes place there. But look at that first part and notice what it says, for the Lord alone knows this. It doesn't say the Lord alone judges it. The Lord alone knows. The Lord knows our spiritual state. He doesn't determine it. He knows it. And that is the judgment. That's the only way the Lord enters into judgment. The Lord never judges anyone except from good. For the Lord is mercy itself and good itself, which cannot possibly condemn anyone. It is man who, in rejecting good, condemns himself. As a person has fled habitually from good during his lifetime, so in the next life he flees from it, and therefore from heaven and the Lord. Everyone will be judged according to what his life is. Thus, everyone brings his judgment with him because he brings his life with him. Very similar passage, but just very slightly different. Everyone is judged according to his deeds, not that these are mentioned in detail as in a court of law, but because he returns to them and acts as before. I'd like you to remember the purpose of judgment. And the purpose of judgment is salvation. We need in our daily lives to make a determination between what is good and what is evil, and then we are urged to choose the good. And that is a very necessary judgment. We must make that. And on occasion, we must make a judgment as we see it within the life of another person with whom we interact. But the purpose is salvation, always. Never should it be condemnation. When we speak and we make that judgment, when we make this choice between good and evil as we see it, the judgment applies as much to the truth, whatever it is, that exists within me. It also occurs to me that often when we make a judgment about a person, we become very angry. It's very easy to get self-righteous. It's very easy to stand on our pedestal, get on our high horse, and get really riled up about these judgments that we make. I want you to notice yourself doing that because it's unnecessary in actual fact. The only thing that is necessary is to speak the truth. So, as you go about your week, examine your judgments. Ask yourself, are they necessary? And are they true? How does my judgment measure up to the standard in which we find in the word of the Lord?